Well, joining me to discuss whether those sanctions will have any impact in Russia is Ben Duda, author of Fragile Empire, How Russia Fell In and Out of Love with Vladimir Putin, and Nina Schick from the independent think tank Open Europe. Ben Duda first, Britain's now backed a whole range of travel bans and asset freezes. Are you impressed or not? Well,
Britain's backed a whole range of very weak sanctions and very weak asset freezes. Vladimir Putin made a bet 3 weeks ago that David Cameron and his associates would never cut off Putin's oligarchs from London, from their homes, from their bank accounts, from their country estates that they now own. And what David Cameron and his party have done over the past 3 weeks is everything to prove Vladimir Putin right.
Well, hang on a sec. EU sanctions now extend to 33 individuals, some of them pretty key.
Britain in the First Cold War would be lockstep with the United States, not lockstep with Bulgaria and Spain. And the United States has imposed tough sanctions on Putin's real power brokers, Putin's mafia clique from St. Petersburg that rule the country. What has the EU done? It's imposed sanctions on the second 11, the third 11, the fourth 11, people that don't actually have assets in the West.
Nina Schick, is that true? Is the UK morally compromised because the city needs Russian money to keep it afloat?
Well, it's all a little bit conspiracy theory from my perspective, because although there is a lot of Russian investment in the city, it only counts for 0.5% of the actual overall total European investment. So we're talking about a global hub here. It's not actually that big of a deal. Secondly, the reason why the EU hasn't been able to take stronger measures on Russia is not to do with David Cameron. In fact, the UK has been one of the most hawkish countries. It's to do with 28 different member states all having different viewpoints and different economic and political relations with Russia that mean that consensus on the next steps are difficult. So it's certainly not to do with the UK.
But we know from that government document that was spotted wending its way up Downing Street that, you know, the UK didn't want to support trade sanctions.
Well, yes, Kathy, and a lot has been made of that document, but that was only the opinion of one advisor. Why don't we actually listen to what David Cameron has actually said in the discussions in Brussels over the past few days? And in fact, the UK has been one of the most vocal countries in calling for broader economic sanctions on Russia.
Well, the UK is hiding behind other European states in its unwillingness to impose unilateral sanctions. Britain could and Britain should impose unilateral sanctions following those of the United States on Putin's clique, and claiming that we can't do this because Bulgaria will veto it in the European Council is undignified of Britain.
You've got to admit, the Russians don't fear Europe at all, do they? I mean, Putin is joking about these sanctions.
Well, I think one of the problems here is too many binary comparisons are being made. This is being simplified into black and white so often in the narrative, as we're doing here, saying that Britain, should back these sanctions. But the Ukraine was faced with a choice between Russia and the EU, and what the EU didn't do is take into account the historical economic links that Ukraine has to Russia. And if you were to station NATO at the borders of Russia, then an autocrat like Putin, of course, has to act. That's his power base. So therefore, it follows that it's actually much more complex than that.
Ben Duda, you're oversimplifying things.
Let me tell you what the view is from Kiev. And the view right now from Kiev is that Britain is, in fact, a partner of the Russian elite in its plunder of Russia's assets, and has been a partner of the Ukrainian elite in the plunder of their country's assets. I spent a week talking with new ministers and candidates running for mayor in Kiev, and what they are going is, we're not stupid. We know where the money goes. We know where the money stolen in our country goes. We know it goes to the British Virgin Islands, that it goes to the Cayman Islands, and it goes to London. And we want that money back. It was quite shocking for me, but perhaps not if one knows how the city makes its money these days, to realise that the reputation of Britain is at rock bottom in Eastern Europe, and that the moral authority gained during the Cold War has been squandered.
Nina Schick, final comment on that?
Well, I think then perhaps, as I already mentioned, that's anecdotal, but if you look at the actual facts, not that much Russian money is actually invested in the City of London. And it's actually countries like Germany who have been the most dovish in taking a hard approach to Russia.
Nina Schick and Ben Duda, thank you very much for joining me. Jahi.